So this is chapter 3 of human development that focuses on the prenatal development. So we know that today about 90% of adults in the U.S. Either have to or plan to have children. It is an individual's choice, although about 30% of U.S. births result from unintended pregnancies. Sometimes adults feel the pressure from family or society to have kids, but not all, do have kids. The textbook talks about the relationship between birth order and sibling spacing. There has been research or hypotheses about intelligence and sibling spacing. Having a larger family with more closely spaced children might lend to a higher IQ, but we know from the research that birth order and sibling space are unrelated to IQ. Firstborn do tend to score higher on IQ tests than later born, but again, it comes the question of genetics versus environment. Oftentimes, the firstborn kids get more attention and have more things than some of the later ones. So, may not necessarily be that firstborn are born more intelligent. So why have kids? There are some advantages, of course, warmth and affection, being able to teach others, provide care. It can strengthen a couple's relationship. It helps with carrying on the heritage and culture of one's family. Being accepted into the community, again, if it is one of those like familial obligations, that can be something that's important. And then, of course, having someone to take care of you later in life, that's another reason to have kids. But there's also some disadvantages. There are still risks of complications during childbirth. Of course, death and complications have decreased with modern medicine, but it is still a factor. You have that responsibility for the child's well-being and always on your mind. Once you have kids, especially if you're a working parent, there can be a large overload of responsibilities and roles. And the world is a crazy place. So there's the responsibility of bringing kids up in this dangerous world. And then you might not have as much privacy and less time to spend with your partner. So, is there a best time? A lot of highly educated women delay parenthood. However, by delaying parenthood, you increase your chances of having a child who may have some kind of complications. Also, you may have difficulty conceiving children. So that's one of the problems with delaying it. We know that conception is when the sperm and ovum unite. There's a germinal period, a period of the embryo, and then a period of the fetus, which are the different stages for development. So about 6 weeks from implantation through the 8th week of pregnancy is the period of the embryo. The period of the fetus is the 9th week to the end of pregnancy, the first trimester, and then the second trimester are the two different parts. And then finally, the third trimester is the rest of the period of the fetus, which is when the fetus is actually viable. So if pregnancy had to be ended early, at this age, the fetus can survive. So one thing that you're going to be working on for your portfolio and something to think about is during all these stages of development, it's important for the mother to consider what she's exposed to. And so teratogens are environmental agents that may cause damage to the growing fetus or embryo. So it can depend on how much, it can depend on heredity. There's, other things like poor nutrition, lack of medical care, and then, of course, the age of the organism. So, for example, consuming a lot of alcohol is not advisable. Some doctors may say one glass of wine is fine, weekly or during the third trimester. So that's what we're talking about with dose and the age. So of course that's something to talk to a doctor about, but just because the mother consumes something one time doesn't mean that it's going to have a harmful effect. So we know that the embryonic period is when the major structural abnormalities can occur. So that's kind of one of the big things. So when we're talking about teratogens, of course, we talk about drugs. There's prescription drugs that can be harmful, non-prescription drugs like ibuprofen or some cold medicines, of course, illegal drugs, tobacco, alcohol, exposure to radiation, even environmental pollution and infectious disease. So you can read more about these in the book. So for your portfolio, these are the instructions that are also in D2L, but you're going to first download the chart protecting the environment inventory, and that's where you're going to read through that, answer the questions. It's not something that you submit, so you can be honest about how often you do those things, how difficult it would be for you to give up those things. And then what you're going to turn in is a one-page response to answer these questions. What did you find most difficult to give up or avoid? Why? What was most surprising? Why? So, you may talk about caffeine or wine, beer, fast food, etc. But it's just like a one-page double-spaced response. So be sure that you save it in a PDF so that it's easy for me to see. And then you're going to choose one of those things that you think was difficult to give up or avoid, and you're going to do some research on it. So please be sure to go to some reputable sites. Make sure to include the sources. But you're going to create a brochure that would be given to mothers about the importance of avoiding that particular teratogen. So if it was caffeine, then you would explain some harmful effects and why it's important to avoid it, what could happen if you don't, different things like that. But make sure that it's a brochure for mothers about the importance of avoiding that particular teratogen for that period of development. So make sure that your brochure is a trifold brochure. You can see the example that I posted. Make sure that it kind of looks like that. And it's in the week 2 folder. And then, offer those strategies. So make sure that you include all of the requirements that go along with it. You need to include some data, some statistics, from the research that you've conducted. You need to include some pictures. So I'll show you that here in just a second. So tobacco is one of the teratogens. About 7% of U.S. women continue to smoke during pregnancy. These are all some research-based findings about problems that can occur from smoking. And feel free to use the book as one of your sources. That is also okay for your brochure. Alcohol is another teratogen. About 10% of women report drinking during previous months in pregnancy. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD, is one condition of of a baby that's born, like fetal alcohol syndrome. So if women are drinking continuously large amounts of alcohol throughout pregnancy, that's something that can occur. Environmental pollution can also play a role. This may not be as big of a problem in the US, but definitely in some industrialized areas and other countries. So it's important to avoid pollutants, but if you don't live in a place that has lots of smoke, there's other things like lead, mercury, things that may be in the home, mold, different things like that, that it's important to consider. So prenatal exposure of diotoxins from burning the fossil fuels is linked to breast and uterine cancer in women, birth weight of twice as many boys as girls, prematurity, deficits in attention and memory during the school year. So there's a lot of factors that can come into play. Also, viral infectious diseases can be harmful. So it's important to, be vaccinated, or to, if you get sick, doing what you can to be able to take care of your illness quickly, depending on the status of your pregnancy. If it's first, second, or third trimester, you may or may not be able to get vaccines during pregnancy. But all of these different things can have an effect on the fetus. And then finally, it's important to think about some other things like exercise, nutrition, decreasing stress. If you have the Rh factor incompatibility, which has to do with um, whether the baby is negative and you're positive, or vice versa, like O positive, O negative blood. That's something the doctor can help you with. And then maternal age can also play a factor. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to do is just kind of go back over what's due this week. So you can look through the PowerPoint slides in addition to the video. And then here's the handout that you can look over. That was something that we talked about on Tuesday. This is the PowerPoint from the video that you're watching. You will need to take your quiz over chapters 2 and 3. It's just like last week. It's due Thursday. So be sure to take that after you have read the 2 chapters. And then this is the information about your portfolio. So this is the survey that you need to take that I was telling you about. Again, you don't submit this, but you will need to complete it on your own. You can do it on your own paper or whatever. You don't have to print it out. But just talking about how often you do these things, how difficult it would be for you to give them up. And then that's what you're going to answer the one-page paper. So you'll submit 2 things to the Dropbox. Your response, that's, again, 1 page double-spaced. Just save it as a PDF. And then you're going to create your brochure. So be sure, here's some different things to consider including. But be sure that you have explanations with some statistical information, like 30% of mothers experience this, or birth weights are this percentage lower, that type of thing. And then include data, and make sure that you explain the data, so you can present the data in a chart or table or just in words, but then you explain what that means. And then make sure that you have check for spelling and grammar errors, and that you have at least 4 pictures. A graphic organizer is like a table or a chart, just a way to kind of organize the information, but it helps to just kind of break it up and make it look a little nicer. So you're going to submit those 2 things. Be sure to save your brochure as a PDF. I did talk about using Canva, C-A-N-V-A, as something to use other than Publisher and Microsoft if you don't have that. But here's an example. Be sure to include your sources. Remember, this is page 1, this is the back, this is the inside flap, and then you're going to have the second page that's going to have kind of the 3 middle sections. So you can see here the different pictures, the statistics, the interpretation of it. But again, this is a brochure for mothers to explain the effects of something and how it can be harmful to them.